What's going on, guys? My name is Justin Murphy. Today I wanted to just take a second to kind of shine some light into what the last 8 or 9 months have looked like for me as a full-time entrepreneur. And I also want to kind of give y'all just a little bit of a history and take y'all way back to the very beginning of my career in the nutrition and fitness space. So, as most of y'all know, about 8 months ago, coming on 9 months, I decided to go all in on myself, right? I decided to take the leap, as those people say, and kind of go all in on the entrepreneur life. I had kind of been dabbling around in it over the last 7-8 years before, as a personal trainer and as like a CrossFit coach, and kind of like in the realm of like a one-entrepreneur, if you will. But over the last 8-9 months is when I finally decided to go all in. And over the last 7-8-9 months here, we've been able to basically evolve from Justin Murphy Nutrition, which is what we kind of started off at as a company when it was just me. And that's evolved now into iCoach Nutrition. And so iCoach Nutrition, it's just like iPhone, the lowercase I and then coach. And so that stands for individualized coaching, which is what we believe is the way to go about nutrition and lifestyle coaching in 2018, right? No more meal plans, no more templates, none of the automated stuff, none of the calculators, none of the robots. Like human interaction and that one-on-one customized approach is really what we see or what we believe to be, the most successful and most sustainable. So let's take it way back. Let's go back to 2010. That is when I graduated high school. Those years, 2016, 2017, 2018, I would argue were probably like some of the darkest times of my life. I was in high school, I was young and dumb, but I think that my experience in high school and then leading into that first semester of college were a lot different than most people. And I was really scared to share my story with people up until about a year or so ago. So when I was in high school, I, like anybody else, I wanted to be popular. Like I played sports. I was always into like impressing girls or being the popular one, whatever you want to call it. But that led into, maybe some decisions that I wasn't proud of. It led into me trying to kind of fit in with the popular crowd. And because of that, it made me, or I chose to do things that, I wish I could have almost like taken back. I wish I wouldn't have gone down that route. But at the same time, I learned so much and I learned so much at a young age. And so when I was playing sports in high school, I ended up getting a scholarship to go play football. And during the time kind of leading up to that, I don't know what it was, but we started getting into not just the party scene, not just drinking, not just like smoking weed and things like that, but like we were actually getting more into like ecstasy and that whole kind of rave club and rave scene, if you will. And those were some really scary times. I took ecstasy on multiple occasions. These are the clubs that start at 4 a.m. and they end at 8 a.m. And then that led into really getting heavily involved in drugs and not just drugs, but also like selling drugs. And this was all, keep in mind, this was all in prep or right before I was leaving to go play football in Kansas. And so, kind of continuing down that negative route or that negative road into Kansas, what that led into is basically me getting arrested in Kansas my first semester of college. And the reason why it wasn't actually for drugs, I'm super lucky that I didn't get in trouble for that. But what it was is we got in trouble at the school. We stole a backpack. It had a wallet in it. We used a credit card at like Walmart, McDonald's, and the gas station. And obviously they got us on camera. And it was me and another friend that we got in trouble. Now I had no idea what I was getting into. Like I was 18 years old at this time. Like I was so naive. And when the police officers came to our dorm room to arrest us, I honestly had no idea what I was getting into. I thought I was just gonna get like a ticket or something, but no, they took us to the like real prison. I got booked and I basically entered a jail cell. Met my cellmate, and he was in there for stabbing 2 people. He was in there for like 8 years for stabbing 2 people. And I think at this moment is when I realized that, shit got real really, really, really fast. I went from thinking I was this, invincible kid that could do anything and everything and never get in trouble and have no rules and no boundaries, to being locked up in a jail cell and thinking that my life was over at 18 years old. To sum up kind of the story with that, I was facing 2 felonies, 7 misdemeanors, 2 years in jail, and tons of fines. And that night that I was in jail, I wasn't really religious then at the time at all. I was in the fast life, I was in the party scene, and I wasn't doing a lot of things that I was proud of. I wasn't really like a positive person, if you will, back then. And I definitely wasn't a religious person back then. And so what's so interesting and kind of my testimonial is that when I was sitting there in Kansas that night, I basically stayed up all night long. I couldn't sleep. I was in tears. I thought my life was over. And that night I reached for and I grabbed a Bible, and I read the Bible the whole entire night. And I made a promise that night to God. I said, look, I know that the last 2-3 years here have really not been good. I know that I haven't used my life. I know that I haven't used myself in a way to help others, but more so, I was harming others, right? Through drugs and different things like that. And so I made a promise that night. I said, God, if you give me this second chance at life, meaning, not getting like felonies on my record, then I promise that I will dedicate the rest of my life to helping other people. And so that's exactly what I've done ever since that day. That next morning I woke up, to my surprise, I was getting bailed out of jail. Then I had another series of events happen that ended up taking me from potentially getting 2 felonies, 7 misdemeanors, and 2 years in jail, all the way to getting 3 years of probation, 5 misdemeanors, and then 3 years later, after being on probation, getting everything completely expunged off my record, and thank God being able to kind of move on with life. But that was just the beginning. I came back to Texas at that time, and I faced my mom and my dad and my 3 little brothers and sisters that were 8 years old, or 2 of them were 8 and one of them was like 5 or 6 at the time. And so facing them was extremely hard. Seeing tears on my mom's face, seeing tears on my dad's face, seeing tears in my brother and sisters who looked up to me. It was one of the hardest things that I've ever experienced, and it was one of the lowest lows that I've ever, had to go through. And when I thought that it was over, when I thought that, coming home and being able to move on and continue my life and take school serious and start my career and all these things, what ended up happening was I came back to what I deserved, but to a lot of negativity, right? Like, here I was, the kid that was like in the homecoming court, that got a football scholarship, that was popular and all these things, and then I came back and everyone's like, you went to jail, like you got in trouble, like you lost your football scholarship, basically it was just a very, very low and a lot of negatives in my life. So I just realized in that moment that, like, although I was so incredibly grateful for this second chance at life, I also was at rock bottom. I realized that I was gonna have to basically rebuild everything that I had worked so hard up to that point to have. I knew that everybody's opinion of me at that time was negative. It was like, you're a failure, you let us down, like all of this negativity. And I would argue that that was the lowest low in my life. It was the darkest time in my life. And, when I made that promise in Kansas, I had no idea what my avenue was at that time, but I just knew that, I wanted to make this promise, and I knew that I was gonna dedicate the rest of my life to this promise. And so I came back to Texas, and I ended up getting a job at 24 Hour Fitness, of all places. I was actually applying to a few different places at that time. Home Depot was one of them. which the interview I was supposed to have with Home Depot, the manager ended up no-showing me. So from there I went to 24 Hour Fitness. I got a job just working front desk. I was folding towels. I was making minimum wage. And I still wasn't happy. I still had no direction. I still, all I knew was that I got lucky and I have a second chance at life. Well, from there, one of the trainers, he asked me one day, he said, hey, why don't you come work out with us? And I was like, sure. And I worked out with him a few different times. And one day he said, why don't you become a personal trainer? And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, a personal trainer? Like, what the hell is a personal trainer? And talked to him a little bit more about it and started doing some research, looking into some different certifications. I ended up choosing NASM, NASM, however you want to say it, and chose their personal training certification. Well, at this time, it was around like $700 or $800, and keep in mind, I was making minimum wage, right? So this was like a huge investment of money, and I did it, and I studied, and I went to go take the test, and I failed. And so for me, it was like, I just hit my lowest low. I kind of got a little bit of motivation, a little bit of confidence to go and better myself and make something of myself. I go and take the test, and then I fail it again. And so, it was just failure after failure. And at that point, I almost quit because I was like, maybe this just isn't for me. But I didn't, and I'm glad that I didn't. I ended up paying to retake it. I studied extremely hard for another month, and I passed. And from there, that led into me actually being one of the top personal trainers at 24 over that 3 to 4 year period of time. I had 1 month that I trained 204 sessions and grossed like $24,000, something like that. But I also realized that I was working for a corporate gym, a big box gym, and I was in school at this time, and so I was really, really creative. I had all these ideas. I wanted to bring as much value to our members at that gym as I possibly could, but because of it being corporate, I just got shut down on a lot. And I realized that I had a ceiling over my head. I realized that no matter how hard I worked, even if I was sitting here training 10, 15 people a day, right? The month that I did 204 sessions, that's 204 50-minute sessions in 1 month. I was training like 10 to 15 clients a day, and I was in school. And so I was just, it was kind of one of those things that I reached burnout. I realized that I had met capacity with the amount of people that I could train, but yet I had a ceiling on how much I could make because I was only taking home, 30%, maybe 40% of what 24 was charging. And so at that point, I ended up leaving. I ended up making my first jump on my own, if you will. And so kind of I don't really want to say entrepreneur because I was just kind of a personal trainer. But I made the jump. I was living in an apartment complex at that time. Me and a buddy rented out a garage and ended up getting some equipment and training our clients in the garage. And we did that for a period of time, I think maybe 6 months, maybe a year, something like that, until I found CrossFit. And I actually was able to start working at a CrossFit gym, kind of fell in love with the whole CrossFit. I started competing, was fortunate enough to qualify for regionals, and really fell in love with the sport. I was coaching and competing in CrossFit for 4 or 5 years, and I was at an amazing facility. And what was cool about that facility is that I didn't necessarily have the ceiling anymore in terms of creativity, right? I had an idea at one point to create a competition, to create different programs, seminars, create a nutrition program. So all of these different really cool things that I got to create, I came up with the idea and I got to go and build myself. And so I'm forever fortunate for that because it really allowed me to continue to be creative over those next 4 to 5 years, rather than getting kind of my creative side shut off by being in that initial corporate setting. And so over all of this time, I kind of, I was in school, I was coaching, I was competing, and I started to realize that, I really needed to make a decision because I was in the CrossFit space, I was in the nutrition space, and then I was also interested in like PT, like physical therapy, rehab, and I was even considering going down that route. And so I realized that I couldn't be an expert at like 3 different things. I really needed to go all in on one thing. And this was about the same time when I had the opportunity to choose if I was gonna go the, kind of traditional RD route, or if I was just gonna get my nutrition degree and work in the field like I had already been doing. And so at that time I was making really good money doing personal training, and I really didn't want to, I was probably making like $60,000, $70,000. And I realized that with the dietetics internship, I was going to have to go do a 1 year unpaid internship in order to become a registered dietitian. And I realized that, I'm going to finish my nutrition degree, but I'm not going to go the dietetics route because 1, I honestly don't want to work in a hospital whatsoever. And 2, I really have this entrepreneur itch. I really want to build something. And so I graduated with my nutrition degree. I actually was able to build a nutrition program at the CrossFit gym that I was at, kind of the last year that I was there. And I learned so much, and it was such a great experience. But I realized still at that point that I still had that ceiling over my head, right? And I really wanted to be able to go all in on building what I had dreamed of for now, 8, 9 years of being in the field and working in the field. And so I met a mentor at that time, a mentor that changed my life. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself necessarily. He turned me from a entrepreneur to an entrepreneur. And really he was that light that I needed to just really force me to get extremely uncomfortable and go all in on my dreams. And this individual I actually wanted to go work for, and he basically denied that and said that he would mentor me. Now, the mentorship investment in myself was something that scared the absolute shit out of me. When I told my wife how much money I was gonna have to spend each month to get mentored by this guy, she thought I was crazy. But what's interesting is that this happened 8 months ago. Here I am, and if I wouldn't have made that decision when I made it, I don't think I actually would have ever gone all in on my dreams, because my wife and I found out that we're having our first kid in February, and this was about 2 months after I quit my job of 5 years, my comfortable job at the CrossFit gym, and started my own business. And it's amazing looking back, knowing that it's only been 8 months, and knowing that we've been, able to go from literally zero to $100,000 in 8 months. And I'm not scared to talk about that or shy or ashamed or anything. I mean, I'm so incredibly proud of that. And it's not about the number, it's about the impact that I know that we're making. And I'm just so incredibly grateful, because I know that none of this would be possible. One, if I wouldn't have had that push that I needed, that person to just believe in me and tell me that I could do it. And I also know that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of the mentors in my life, and then now the team that I have, the team that, basically enables all of this to happen, the clients that we have that enable all of this to happen. And so, my dream is to go out in this world and create real impact. We live in the United States of America that is under a obesity epidemic, but yet we're in a place of information overload. We're in a place where there's so many conflicting stories around nutrition, and yet we're living in an obesity epidemic. And so, for me and for the team, it's just something where we really want to go out and help people. It all stemmed back from 10 years ago, which is crazy, when I dedicated my whole entire life to helping other people. And if I wouldn't have gotten that second chance back in Kansas 10 years ago when I was sitting in a jail cell,
I wouldn't have been able to help the thousands of people that I've helped thus far over the last 8 to 9 years. And our goal of helping 1 million people is now going to be possible because I'm starting to build the team that's going to be able to go out and create that impact. So that's my story, guys. There's a lot of things in there that, I'm not proud of. There's a lot of things in there that I wish I wouldn't have done. I wish I wouldn't have gone through. But at the same time, I have to remind myself that me going through all of these things in my life, me overcoming all of this adversity in life, me going from literally rock bottom to now living my best life and living out my dream. Like, I'm no different than you. Like, I'm not special. Like, I literally was a POS, back then in those days. Like, I look back at the kid that I was back then, and it makes me sick. But I made a promise on that night. I made a promise to God when I wasn't religious, and I turned, and there was this turning moment, and this is me paying it forward and letting you know that, like, whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is that you're struggling with, like, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you have the opportunity to change your story. The story that I was living, the life story, my legacy that I had back at 18 years old, if I would have continued that, I would either have been dead or in jail. But in that moment, on that night, in that jail cell, I decided to change my story. Don't be afraid to go change yours.